Coming up on this edition of Pinpoint Weather University, we're taking a look at the very strong El Nino that's likely. We'll talk about the changing weather patterns that could mean for us here in the Carolinas, the U.S., and across the globe, and some are even calling it a potential super El Nino. We're looking inside at that. Plus, Artemis 2 launch windows are finally here. The 45th Weather Squadron, they're forecasting the launch. We'll talk about what weather conditions need to be near perfect for a successful launch day. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson here on Queen City News Plus, and Pinpoint Weather University starts right now. Welcome into Pinpoint Weather University here on Queen City News Plus. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. Thanks again for joining us, and also a big shout out to our YouTube viewers. And if you're tapping in with me at WXBrandon9 on Instagram, I post a lot of highlights from our show. So if you're just tapping in for the first time, let me know over there on Instagram. Tap with me at WXBrandon9. Also tap in with us at Fox 46 Charlotte on Instagram, or if you just type in Queen City News on Instagram, you'll be able to find us as well. A lot of folks tapping with us on Facebook. Like to see some of the chatter on Instagram as well, as we continue to press forward on Queen City News Plus with all our originals and our show at 3 o'clock now hitting the waves on CW Charlotte 2 WNYT. So again, a lot of special things happening right now, and I'll tell you what, I want to give a shout out to Kevin Pinto as well. He is the one that puts together this show and a lot of other originals. And he's got his own show, the Tired Parents Club. So tap in with him over at the Tired Parents Club. Him and Sierra Lang for doing a good job with that show. And they have some of the parents from our Queen City News studios and also around the area trying to help us navigate when it comes down to being tired parents. Now, I'm not a parent myself, but I'm even a meteorologist, and I'm tired. It has been a busy spring so far here. Now, we haven't really seen a lot of weather in the Charlotte area in regards to rain and thunderstorms, with the exception of the severe weather threats we had earlier in the month, where we saw the tornado touchdown in northeast Charlotte and really towards the Atondo area. But something else we've been tracking has been the wildfire threat. And the reason why is because we have had a lot of dry days here recently. As a matter of fact, this has been a drought we've been tracking for a while. For the last several months, we've been below normal on rainfall. And this is looking at the March calendar here. Notice there is no March 31st on there. We're taping this on March 31st. So it's going to be a day with 0 inches of rain. We're not projecting any rain for Charlotte. That's why we will have the 8th driest March on record for Charlotte. We only had 4 days with measurable rainfall this month, and only 2 of those, Thursday, March 12th, and Monday, March 16th, were days where we had over ½ an inch of rain. Does it help the drought not get worse? Sure. But is it going to help us eliminate the drought? No. Something else we've been tracking here in Charlotte is very hot weather. Hot and dry weather don't go well together. The big reason why is because whenever you have hot and dry conditions, that allows for more evaporation to happen. So when you're already dry and you get very warm temperatures, you're also sucking more moisture out of the ground because the atmosphere can take more moisture when temperatures are warmer. But unfortunately, that leads to more drier conditions. We've had 4 days with record highs just this month in March. It's going to be the 3rd warmest March on record. And that's including what the forecast will be here for March 31st as of taping this today. So 3rd warmest March on record coming up. But again, you probably didn't come on the show and expect me to talk about March, but I did want to get those details in there. I want to talk as well about the very strong El Nino that's likely here. It's also being referred to as a super El Nino, which is kind of a fancy term for it's going to be very strong and could even be a historical El Nino for the area. And this could lead to changing weather impacts across the country, but also across the globe, because it changes the way the jet stream patterns are. And the jet stream, I always tell people, and when it comes down to Mother Nature and weather itself, it sounds a little cliche, but if you're a football fan, you hear coaches say a lot, and really all the time. My head coach, Coach Glass, would say it all the time whenever I was playing football in high school. He would say, whatever happens, whatever happens usually starts up front. Offensive line, defensive line. Now, when it comes down to Mother Nature, whatever happens usually upstairs. It starts upstairs at the upper levels with the jet stream. And that is why El Nino events can change weather patterns drastically. So let's look at some of the strongest El Nino events that we've had since 1950. 2015. That is a historical El Nino. That's the strongest El Nino we've seen here in the last 70 years. We're talking about when water temperatures in parts of the central and eastern Pacific were 2.75 degrees Celsius above normal. And then 1997, 1982, also years where we had water temperatures in parts of the central and eastern equatorial Pacific way above 2 degrees Celsius. So again, these are very significant El Ninos and some of the strongest El Ninos we have seen since 1950. Now, let's chat about what an El Nino is. Again, the strong El Nino is classified as one where you have water temperatures in the eastern or central Pacific above 1.5 degrees Celsius. But when you're looking at the El Nino, let's kind of show it map-wise. Some of you might be more of a visual learner here. And if you're on the show, you love weather, you probably already know what an El Nino is. You probably have seen it multiple times, but I still wanted to go over it for some of our new viewers that might be kind of new to weather or just are kind of learning how climate patterns like this work. So, El Nino. Essentially what happens out in the eastern and central Pacific, the equatorial Pacific there, we've got westerly trade winds. Excuse me. Sometimes those westerly trade winds are very strong. Sometimes they're very weak. However, whenever those trade winds are very strong, we push warmer water across the equatorial Pacific over towards Asia and Australia. So usually you get below normal water temperatures whenever you have strong westerly winds. We call that a La Nina. But when it comes down to an El Nino, these westerly trade winds, they get weaker. And what ends up happening is that allows that warmer water that's been pushed over towards Asia and Australia to slosh back over towards the central and eastern equatorial Pacific. You end up getting above normal water temperatures. So that's why we're going to be tracking what could be an extremely strong El Nino, because we've got very weak westerly trade winds, and that is going to allow for warmer water to really fill in to parts of the central and eastern equatorial Pacific and cause, again, a potential historical El Nino. Now, it's going to take some time to see the impacts here. I'm getting ready to go over the impacts that we could see here in the U.S. and also the impacts when it comes to hurricane season, but it's going to take months before we really get into maybe some of these potential impacts. This isn't getting ready to happen right now. These are patterns we're going to see more towards summer and also as we get towards the fall months. So let's talk about it. Here's the U.S. climate pattern for an El Nino. Whenever you have an El Nino in place, a very strong one at that, that amplifies the southern branch of the jet stream. So when the southern branch of the jet stream is amplified, we call it the subtropical jet stream. That allows for more storm tracks there. So you're getting wetter than normal conditions across the southern U.S., which can be drought-busting rains for parts of Texas and other locations further south. And then as you're getting further north, the polar jet stream, it's getting pushed further north, and it allows for drier conditions over the northern U.S. because you have less of a storm track there with the jet stream not over that region. Now, this also changed our temperatures a bit. Because the subtropical jet stream, the southern branch of the jet stream, is going to be more amplified and it's going to create more stormy weather over the southern U.S., whenever you have stormy weather, more clouds and rain, you have cooler temperatures typically. So we typically get cooler than normal temperatures over the southern U.S. because of those stormy conditions. And then further north, where the jet stream's lifting further north, you get warmer conditions because you have more sunnier days and you don't have that big dip in the colder air pushing down from the north. So that's why it ends up a little bit warmer further north. Now, here in the Carolinas, we kind of tend to be in the middle here. When it comes down to El Ninos, looking at research in just past years for El Nino years, we usually get these warm and drier summers. And then as we get towards the winter months, because the southern branch of the jet stream gets stronger, you can get more northeastern tracks. So we tend to get a little bit cooler and wetter during the winter months. We'll talk more about us here in just a second. I also want to talk about hurricane season because it's also something that gets significantly impacted sometimes when it comes down to El Ninos, hence the word sometimes. This isn't always the case, and I'll explain why here in just a second. El Ninos, the impact on hurricane seasons. Whenever you have weaker trade winds, you get warmer water, you're getting higher moisture content, more stormy activity over the equatorial Pacific, and you're also getting more stormy activity with the southern branch of the jet stream. And this creates more wind shear out in the Atlantic Ocean. Whenever you're getting more wind shear, during hurricane season, that rips apart a lot of hurricanes. So hurricanes aren't conducive for formation whenever you're tracking more wind shear. However, in the Pacific Ocean, this actually is a little bit more opposite. You get less wind shear out in the Pacific Ocean, so the Pacific Ocean hurricane season actually gets a bit more active. And you get more of a threat for hurricanes for spots like Hawaii and things like that because there's not enough wind shear to rip apart hurricanes out there. But as I mentioned before, I want to put a disclaimer out there. This is not always the case. These climate patterns don't always come to fruition. And I'm getting ready to show you a perfect example of that by looking at the 2023 hurricane season. 2023, we had an El Nino, a pretty strong one at that. We had 19 named storms during the 2023 hurricane season, which was fourth most of the time. Most of those stayed offshore. I'll take it full screen for you so you can get a better look. We had Harold make landfall that year. We had Idalia, and we also had Ophelia make landfall. Now, Idalia, Hurricane Idalia, is probably the one that you probably raised your eyebrows at when you heard me say it because it was the strongest storm to make landfall that year in the U.S. It made landfall around the Big Bend area of Florida as a Category 3 storm right over Keaton Beach, Florida. Category 3, sustained winds 115 miles per hour. Had a storm surge of about 8.04 feet. Steinhatchee River area. We had significant impacts along the coast, too, because that tropical storm just kind of meandered along the Carolinas coastline. So you're talking about a lot of beach erosion from that storm. And again, this was 2023, August 26th to August 31st. And I want to point out, for hurricane seasons, even if we had, let's say, 5 named storms for a hurricane season. Not saying this would be the case. It's going to be very hard to get that now with some of the warmer water temperatures that we have each year when it comes down to hurricane seasons out in the Atlantic. But let's say we had 5 named storms. That would be considered a extremely below average hurricane season. What if one of those named storms, Category 4 storm, made landfall somewhere in the U.S.? It's an active season. Automatically. Again, it only takes one hurricane for an extremely active season. Imagine having 2 or 3 make landfall that could be strong out of those 5. Now you've got an extremely historic hurricane season with just 5 named storms. Again, this is just an example. This isn't going to happen. I mean, you never know. 5 named storms, hey, I doubt very seriously it happens anytime soon with the warmer water temperatures we're seeing, but I just wanted to use that as a kind of an example to let you know it only takes one hurricane to really cause a significant impact. But the reason why we could still get active hurricane seasons even when we have El Nino years is because of this, our ocean warming stripes here. So this is looking at how above normal or how below normal our global ocean water temperature is. Now, this is averaging, all the water temperature together across the globe and just kind of giving us a number. Notice from 1850 to about the middle of this chart here, which I assume would probably be around, let's say, the 1925 or 1930 range. But you've got below normal ocean temperatures, meaning that temperatures were cool in the oceans during that time period. But then as you get over to the right of this warming stripes chart, you've got all this red popping up. And that means that ocean water temperatures across the globe are getting above average. And as that color gets darker and darker and more part of the read as we're getting closer to 2024, that is a sign at record-breaking ocean water temperature across the globe. So even though we can have high wind shear and we can have storms be torn apart, doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to form, because we have very warm water temperatures, and that is extremely conducive of hurricane development. So, just want to caution you. You're going to see it a lot on social media. You'll probably see some of the forecasts come out from certain organizations that say we're going to have below normal hurricane season. But, I'm telling you, I've seen it before in El Nino years. Although typically El Nino years we have below normal hurricane activity, with some of the historical water temperatures we've been seeing here lately due to human-induced climate change, we can still see an active season. It only takes one of those stronger hurricanes to make landfall here in the U.S. or really anywhere, the Caribbean Ocean or Caribbean area. I mean, we're talking about Puerto Rico and those spots, like they get Jamaica, they get hit hard. It's still an active season. Their impacts are just as grave as ours when they see strong storms. So just something to keep in mind here. So just summing up El Nino, and then we'll get to our next topic here, talking about Artemis 2 here, pull with dearly. But El Nino, what it could mean for the Carolinas, warmer and drier summers are more frequent during El Ninos here in the Carolinas. That means we could have a warm and dry summer, which wouldn't be good, obviously, for a drought. But then you get more into a cooler and wetter pattern during the winter, and the big reason why is because you're getting a little bit more of the nor'easter track. Again, I'm going to show this map for you, the subtropical jet stream map that I just showed you. And you see that southern branch of the jet stream, the moisture feed there, I've got it labeled as. That is just a very active southern branch of jet stream there that is going to, during the winter, allow for more areas of low pressure to track along it and potentially produce more nor'easters. And that can lead to more of an active winter here for us here in the Carolinas. And then the last one, less tropical activity. Take it with a grain of salt. We usually average less hurricane activity whenever you're talking about El Nino years because of the wind shear, but not always the case. Something we'll definitely be tracking, though, as we get a little bit closer. Coming up next here on Pinpoint Weather University, we've got to chat about Artemis 2. Forecasts are starting to come out. The launch windows are coming. We're going to show you exactly the weather conditions that the 45th Weather Squadron is looking at to determine if it's safe for launch. Coming up next here on Pinpoint Weather University. Welcome back into Pinpoint Weather University. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. Artemis 2 happening, coming. The launch windows are here. The highly anticipated mission to the moon is incoming. Now, when it comes to forecast at Artemis 2, there are a lot of details that have to be looked at. Looking at air temperature, wind speeds, not just at the surface, but above our heads, and clouds play a big role because clouds produce a lot of things. They can produce ice crystals if you get above freezing with some of those clouds. They can produce lightning. They can produce rain. They can produce snow. Obviously, snow not a concern when it comes down to missions down in Florida, but still, I mean, it's just something that a lot of meteorologists are going to be keeping an eye on when it comes down to our launch. Now, Artemis 1, forever to get a launch. Forever. Artemis 2, we'll see how long it takes. First launch window is April 1st. During the evening. Hopefully things work out. And I want to show you exactly, again, what the meteorologists at the 45th Weather Squadron are going to be looking at when it comes down to this launch. So essentially, forecasting the launch, what conditions are monitored, air temperatures looked at, surface and upper level winds also looked at, and then I mentioned clouds. Clouds are a big deal because, again, they can produce precipitation. Launches during precipitation do not happen. Not happening. Clouds producing lightning, not happening. So that's why clouds are, they play a big role. And anytime you're seeing cumulus cloud layers growing, you get the concern for maybe lightning or precipitation to pop up out of some of those clouds. So that's why conditions can change rapidly when it comes down to forecasting some of these missions. So air temperature, this won't be a particular problem for this mission, Artemis 2. But when you're looking at the lower end of air temperature, if the 24-hour average temperature drops below 41 degrees Fahrenheit, the launch is delayed at least 24 hours. Now, during the higher end of the spectrum, when it comes down to temperature, if the 24-hour average temperature rises above 95 degrees, the launch is delayed at least 24 hours. It's just too hot for the launch. So air temperature is monitored at 130 and about 256 feet. So air temperature not going to be an issue for this launch, but I still wanted to talk to you about it and let you know it's one of the things that is monitored. Now, wind speeds, another thing, obviously one of the more significant things that's monitored during launch days. Surface winds, if they're too strong, it can impact the launch pad operation. So if you have very gusty winds down at the surface, that can interrupt things down at the surface for the launch. And that is something, obviously, that needs to be perfect. You need launch pad operations to be good. If things aren't good before the rocket's taking off, yeah, that's not going to be necessarily something you want to take off in, right? And then upper level winds, if they're too strong, it can lead to structural stress on the rocket, and it can also alter the rocket's trajectory. So those are obvious things there. If the winds are too strong in the upper levels, there's no reason to launch. You can knock it off knock the rocket's trajectory off. You don't get the rocket to where you want it to go. Hinges the mission a bit. Then you're talking about structural stress to the rocket and potential catastrophic failure when you're talking about extremely strong upper level winds. So they never take that risk when it comes down to launching. Now let's talk about something else. Clouds. Yeah, I've been talking about clouds a lot here lately in the last few minutes of this episode of Pinpoint Weather University. Again, you are watching Pinpoint Weather University here on Queen City News Plus. So cloud cover weather constraints here. Clouds that are producing precipitation, no launch. Thick cloud layers that are below freezing, no launch. Clouds capable of producing a charge or lightning, no launch. Lightning actually can tend to be one of the biggest risks when it comes down to launches being scrubbed. So that is what we're looking at when it comes down to weather forecasting for rocket launches, particularly Artemis 2 as well. Now, the 45th Weather Squadron, they're the ones that are going to be forecasting here for Artemis 2. They put out their own forecast sheet, and it has all that stuff listed out. And I'm going to show you what an example forecast sheet for Artemis 2 looks like for Wednesday, April 1st, coming up here on the other side of the break. You're watching Pinpoint Weather University. Welcome back into Pinpoint Weather University. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. Again, Artemis 2 launching hopefully on Wednesday, April 1st. At least that's the first launch window, but there will be numerous launch windows, even if it doesn't work out on the evening of Wednesday, April 1st. Again, welcome in. Meteorologist Brandon Lawson here on Queen City News Plus. We were just talking about forecasting for Artemis 2. We're still going to kind of chat about that a little bit, but I wanted to give you more of an insider look at like what an example forecast sheet looks like from the 45th Weather Squadron. So again, let me go ahead and pull that up for you here. It's actually kind of cool. So this is a look at the launch mission execution forecast. Let me take it full screen for you. I know it's a little hard to see some of the words. I tried to pull it up as much as I can for you and zoom it in. So again, this is the launch mission execution forecast from the 45th Weather Squadron, and it's looking at the probability of violating weather constraints. But first off, at the top of it, it talks about when it was issued and what day this forecast is valid for. So it's looking at the forecast for Wednesday, April 1st, and it's looking at the launch window in particular. So when you look down below the top of that launch mission execution forecast, the issue date and the mission, and when the date's valid, forecast is valid for, you see forecast discussion. It says the front that passed through the area over the weekend remains stalled across South Florida and will gradually disintegrate over the next several days. So it's just talking about what features are there. Fronts, high pressure, things like that. Matter of fact, these are forecast discussions that the National Weather Service writes on a daily basis for certain regions. Here at the Greenville-Spartanburg National Weather Service office, which we use the most here, the Queen City News viewing area, covers the Charlotte area. They release forecast discussions like this. Forecast discussion for a week like this week, on this March 29th week, we're tracking a Bermuda high strongly off the eastern U.S., and that strong Bermuda high is going to allow for more warmer air moisture to build into the Carolinas, which could lead to wildfire relief over our area. That's just an example of a forecast discussion. This is just looking at it over South Florida, where obviously this mission will take place. So probability of violating weather constraints, that's the next thing on this list. And essentially, launch day, it says 20%. There's a 20% chance of probability of violating weather constraints, which could be the clouds or it could be the wind. It can also be solar activity if it's too high. So essentially, when you're looking at this sheet here, notice the primary concerns for that 20% of the violating weather constraints. It says cumulus clouds rule. So let's say cumulus clouds are too overwhelming. They won't fly through that. And then ground winds. Ground winds could be a little too breezy for the successful launch pad operations. Just talking about that. So again, that is what they're looking at. And then there's also another section too on here, 48-hour delay, primary weather concerns. That's not really going to be happening. It's really just a launch day thing you want to pay attention to. 48-hour delay is just essentially looking at, the next day. Is there a chance that there's going to be, probability of violating weather constraints over the next couple of days. So again, additional risk criteria: solar activity low. I believe it's now low to moderate as we're recording this here on Tuesday, March 31st. Man, getting all my dates confused. So that is a look at the Artemis 2 forecast sheet. And again, the super El Nino, probably seen it a lot on social media. Super El Nino, very strong El Nino. It's possible, even likely in some aspects. We talked about why you shouldn't be scared of it, though. It could change some impacts when it comes down to weather patterns, and that's something we'll be looking at for the rest of the year. And then Artemis 2, enjoy the launch. Enjoy the launch. I know meteorologist Andrew Brightman is going to love this launch. He's been talking about it. Crowd control. You can watch him, his space show, also here on Queen City News Plus, one of our originals. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson, signing off with you here on Pinpoint Weather University. As always, take care of yourself and each other as we navigate this earth together. We'll see you next time, my friends.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.